It's a little bit after 11 here in Central American time. Not Central America, but Central US time. And this is our Sales JS Community Forum for today, Friday, August 22nd. Mike McNeil, your regular host, is feeling a little under the weather this morning. So I'm Scott Gress. I'm here with Cody Stolman, also known as Particle Banana. And we're going to be taking you through some stuff this morning and answering some questions. We didn't have a special topic aligned, I don't think, yet for this week, so we decided one thing we could talk about that doesn't get a whole lot of attention and isn't necessarily documented as well as some of the other parts of sales is the hooks feature of sales. So there's two main ways to extend global functionality to something in your sales project. And when I say global, I mean something, code that can be used in your controllers, in your models, pretty much anywhere that you have code in your project, you can use these functions. And the two ways that you can do this are using either services or hooks. Services are a little simpler, but they're not quite as powerful. Hooks allow you to take a little bit more advantage of certain aspects of sales, like routing and configuration, and do something that you might want to repeat in more than one project. So, for example, here at Balderdash, we have an email hook that Cody made that we've been using in a few projects, and it's the kind of thing where it allows you to kind of bundle a bunch of functionality together and port it from one place to another. So that's really nice. So to take a look at something really simple, let's take a look at a simple service just so we can get an idea of the difference between, say, a service and a hook. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and if anybody is not able to hear us or see my screen or anything like that, just post something in the questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get that fixed up.
I'm on IRC as well.
And Cody's on IRC, so you can post stuff in there as well. So okay, let's go to the screen share here, and I'm using our friend Loic's computer. It's got a French keyboard, so if you see me hitting all sorts of wild and wacky keys by accident, then that is the reason. Google plugin would like to control his computer. I don't know what any of that means. Okay, so let's close this up, close these up. So right now I've gone ahead and done a sales new just to get a new project going. So you can see all the regular stuff here, API assets config and such. Services folder is initially empty. There's nothing really in there. And there's no generator for making a service. You just kind of make whatever file you want. But let's quickly make a really quick controller so that we can demonstrate doing something. So I'm going to go into my sales test folder and do sales generate API user, always a favorite. And that's created our user controller. And I'll go in to my user controller and just make a quick action called hello. And all this is going to do is send a nice greeting to everybody out there. Okay. Always good to continuously test your stuff as you're doing it. So, oh, the old prompt gets us again. This is good. This should just keep popping up in every community forum we do, just to remind you always that you need to choose a migration strategy. All right, before I even answer this, I'm going to go back so that I can get in the habit myself of just going ahead and setting a strategy here.
So screen share stopped.
Said that?
Oh, back again.
Okay, great. Migrate alter. It's there as a default for you, so we can just turn that on.
I don't think it shares the terminal.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I have changed to migrate alter and I've lifted my sales app. I can now. Oh, are you not seeing the screen? Oh, you don't see anything. Okay, well, you should because it's the only way I'll know if we're doing anything right. Okay, so are you not seeing the screen?
I don't know if it's delayed or not, but no.
Hmm.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
It's delayed. Just keep going.
Okay. I'm gonna keep on going, but I wanted to see if it brings up Chromium when I do my screen share. So let's take a look at
You can share your desktop.
my desktop. Uh-oh, that was a mistake. Stand by, everybody. Technical difficulties. Google Hangouts, getting started. Let's do this one. So this is the getting started with Google Hangouts screen. We're going to go to localhost 1337. That will show us that we have a nice new app. And then, you're still not seeing this?
I think it's delayed.
Okay. And go to user test. Ooh. No? No good? Oh, user hello. Sorry. User hello. And we'll see that we have hi there going on. I'm taking a look. Oh, yeah, it's severely delayed. So, okay, I guess we shouldn't pay attention to that. So, okay, so just to demonstrate now, we've got our user hello, our action going on. And now I'll demonstrate just really quickly what a service will do for you as opposed to a hook that we'll get into in just a moment. So we have some functionality here that says res.send hi there. And we could say want to, replace this with some sort of a message that is configurable elsewhere. And let's say we, for some reason, wanted this logic that determines what this message is to be globally available to all of our controllers and actions in our app. A service is a really quick way to do that. So to create a new service, you simply create a file in the services folder. Name it anything you like. Typically, it's good to call it something that ends with service. Let me go back and start sharing my screen again here. Okay, so we're going to create a new service file. We'll call it hello service.js. And it's just a regular node module. So it starts with module exports. And you can either make this an object or just a function. So let's just make a quick function. It's not necessary that you name your functions, but it's always kind of good practice to do it. So we'll call this get hello message. And all this is going to do is return something that says, hi, y'all, because we're in Texas. So what I've done now by creating this hello service file is everywhere in my code, in a controller, in a model, any place, you can now call hello service, and it's going to give you back this function. So instead of doing res send hi there, I can do res send hello service, and it should give me back that message. Let's try moving over to sharing my screen here. And I will relift my server in the background and reload, and you can say when I refresh it, and it says hi y'all because it's using that service. So good use of services, something that we do a lot, is just anytime where you find you're writing kind of simple methods or functions that you then need to share between controllers, but it's just simple things like utility methods and things like that are like what I just demonstrated, where all it's doing is sending back a string or doing like a simple calculation. That's a good place to use a service. Or if you've got a few methods that don't necessarily share between, don't share code between each other, but have kind of similar purpose, you can then group them together into a service. So an example of that would be, let's go back and share the right screen again. So if instead of doing just this one function, there was a whole greeting service that I wanted to do, instead of doing a function, I could do an object and each one of these things could be a function, or it could be even like some constants. And when you think about it, it really is a very simple thing. It's pretty much the same as putting this file anywhere in your project and then doing, var hello service equals require, let's say if it was in lib hello.js, you get pretty much the same functionality. The difference is that in the case of service, sales is globalizing it for you, so it's kind of doing the equivalent of this line here, hello service equals require, whatever, in every controller and model and other service in your app. So that's services. They're really simple, but when it's a case where you want some sort of extensibility for your app or some sort of function that you may want to share between different projects, that's when you want to get into hooks. The things that hooks can do that that services can't really do are there's probably 3 or 4 things. Number one, they can take advantage of sales configuration, so you can give them a default configuration that then you can override using your regular configuration files. So in the case of an email hook, you could have some default from email or default subject that you could then use your regular project configuration to override. You can also, let me stop sharing this thing. You can use an initialization function for your hooks, which you can't do with services. So when sales lifts, it goes through and it runs the initialize function of every hook. So you could use that to kind of bootstrap some things or to check that certain configurations are valid or that certain things are true. Like, again, if you're doing an email hook, you could check that you could communicate with the email server first, and if not, maybe decide to change some functionality or just not lift your app at all. And you can also, in the hooks, you can add routes to your app really easily. So, for example, in the core sales internationalization hook, we add a route that gets bound before anything else that adds internationalization functionality to your app, actually. Let me just show that really quickly. So sales internally uses a lot of hooks for functionality. It's a way to keep things really modular. So if we take a look inside this sample project and we go into sales, node modules, sales, lib, hooks, and not blueprints, but if we take a look at I18N, you can see it's adding this route before all the other, before means before the user route. So if you have a project and you have a config routes.js file, this route is going to be bound before all of those, and it's just saying all, so every verb, get, put, post, patch, whatever crazy route, verb you can come up with, and /*, so any path for any of those is going to be running this I18N initialization function and adding I18N, also known as double underscore, to res.locals so that it's available for all of your views. So that's something that you can do in a hook. So how do we go about building our own hooks? Let's take a look. Cody, anything to add so far?
Sounds great.
Cody says it sounds great, so we're just going to keep on plugging along. So we saw how to do a service. You put it in the services folder. Hooks being slightly less documented and slightly less used in Uline projects so far, don't get a folder automatically created for them. So if you want to do your own hook, the first step is to make a hooks folder. Call it hooks, not surprisingly. And the fourth thing that hooks can do that services really can't do all that well is to use multiple files for functionality and bundle them all together. So in this case, that means that you're going to create a new folder for each hook, and the name of the folder is going to be the name of the hook. So if we add one called, let's do a pretend email hook. We're not going to send any emails today, but we'll make believe. So we'll call this hook email, and the minimum requirement here is that it's got to have an index.js file. After that, you can put whatever files you want in this folder. and sales will pretty much ignore them, letting you inside of your hook use them using require like you would do anything else. So now we have our index. The way that you instantiate a hook file is it is always going to be a function that takes one argument, and that argument is the global sales object. And then what it does is returns an object. And depending on what you put in this object, that's how your hook is going to expose functionality. Typically, you're going to at least want to have an initialize. Initialize is an asynchronous function, so it takes a callback. And you have to always remember to return the callback, or else it's going to hang. Actually, let's demonstrate what happens if you don't return a callback. So our initialize function, at first, we'll just throw something in the log just to say that we're here. So we're saying made it to the initialize email hook. I'm going to relift my app. Oh, actually, I guess I need to share that with everybody. Okay, so let's stop sharing that, and we will share. Oh, how do I put this in another standby? We're putting this in the right desktop. Okay, great, thanks. So where is it? This one? Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so now I'm sharing my terminal here, and I'm going to make sure I'm in the right place. All right, sales test, and I'm going to lift sales, and we're going to see what happens. Starting app, made it to the initialize email hook, great, and now what's happening? Nothing. And in a moment, it's probably going to complain. Maybe not.
It should say something about sales taking long.
Yeah, eventually, I think if we leave this here long enough, it will say something about sales taking a very long time to load and asking if perhaps you forgot to call the callback in one of your...
That may only be in the bootstrap.
Oh, okay, maybe. Well, that's something we should probably add.
Yeah.
So in this case, all right, so we made it to the initialize email hook, but because we didn't call the callback, it's just going to hang there forever. So let's quit out of there and go back and add the callback. So always good to do a return on your callback so that you don't forget and do some other stuff later afterwards that then gets executed. Okay, let's save that and go back, sales lift again, and you'll see that it now goes to the initialization hook and then continues on its way and lifts sales. Okay, so all fun and well, it doesn't do too much yet, but it's at least demonstrating how the initial thing works. And if we lift sales in verbose mode, you'll see that your hook gets loaded after a whole bunch of other internal hooks. Oh, sales lift verbose. Okay, so if we now look at this, we can see module loader hook, logger hook, request hook, all these different hooks. And then at the bottom, it starts saying loading user hooks. So it waits for all of the core hooks to load so that you have access to all of that stuff. And then located one user hook, and here made it to the initialization of the email hook. Great. And then email hook loaded successfully. So that's automatically put in there for you. Okay, so let's add something else to our hook. Let's add some arbitrary functionality to it and show how you can use that. Okay, let's do this. So you can add kind of arbitrary methods to your hook just the same way that you kind of do with a service. So in this case, we can make a fake send method. And for now, we'll just say that send log something to the console. sent an email. It's not actually going to send an email, obviously, but okay. So we save that, and then if you wanted to expose this in your app and just use this, we can just do sales.hooks.email.send. And that's kind of the simple way of accessing that functionality. So let's try this. I'm going to relift the server. I'm just going to leave it on this screen and then go to my other screen and hit that same route that we've been looking at before, and we'll see what happens. 500 server error. Property of hello service is not function. Oh, what did I do? Oh, right. Okay, let's try that again. I fixed it. Okay, so I'm lifting it again, and I'm going to load that route again. And you'll see, you didn't see me loading the route, but as I reload the web page, it'll just keep doing that log, because what it's doing is hitting that email send function that I put in the hook. Okay, so now that we've got kind of the simple stuff out of the way, how do you do the more interesting things that you can do in hooks?
Yeah, there was a question from the IRC about what is a use case for the email hook?
Okay. A use case for this email hook that we're building, obviously so far it doesn't do anything. But for what we've been using email hook for is it's a way to encapsulate a certain function, in this case sending an email, that otherwise would take a few different files, kind of spread out around your project. You can group them together into this hook. And the real benefit of making the email hook or the email functionality into a hook is the way that you can use Sales's configuration. So I'll show that right now so we can kind of see what we're getting at.
And you also get an initialization.
Right.
So like for Node Mailer or something like that, it's going to generate the transport for you.
Exactly.
On Lyft.
So it's going to, you can do all of the stuff that you need to initialize, like Cody said, the transport in this initialization function. And you can do that based on different configuration. You can do that, based on all sorts of different things. So, okay, one of the other things that you can do in a hook that makes it a little bit more relevant is put in defaults. And the way this works, actually, Cody, can you pull up the email hook on your thing, just so I have a reference to remember how this looks? Is you're going to be in the defaults. You're going to be able to set sales config defaults. Let me make sure that I'm on the right screen here. Hangouts. So great, thank you. Okay, so whatever you set in this defaults object here is going to be merged into the sales config before user land config, like local JS config, gets logged in. So in this case, we want to namespace it under email, since we're the email hook, and we're going to put in some sample things that you might find if you were actually building an email hook. So what kind of service are you using? We'll say we're using the Gmail service, authorization to get into that service, username, my email at gmail.com, password, some password. And this email here, this configuration here is likely to be overridden in an actual project by some actual credentials that you can use. And then other stuff like, who's the email typically from? You could say, no one, that's noreply.com. And different things like we use NodeMailer a lot, which has templating functionality. So you could put which template directory you're going to be expecting things to come from. You can say it's coming from views.email templates, all this stuff. And now what we'll see, let's go back to actually, let's do this in the console, and we can see how this affects the regular sales config. So if I go into my console here, and I do sales console, and then I do sales config email, you'll see that email, those defaults got automatically merged into the sales config. But what I can then do, just like I would do with any other project that I was doing in sales, is I can override those on multiple levels. So the easiest, quickest way is just to do it with your local JS, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Can do local.js. This has become a very big file. But what we can do is say, all right, well, for my email auth, I want the username to be, Scott at sales.js or sales.org, and my password to be, my pass. And then when I relift, I do sales config email, you'll see that the auth has changed to sales.org and my pass, but the rest of it has remained the same because we have those defaults in there. And that's one of the things that's really great about using a hook this way, is that you can, it merges the configuration in, so you can keep some stuff, you can override other things. So that's kind of one thing that's really useful about hooks and why we use them for email, as opposed to something like a service where doing something like this with configuration would be kind of difficult and a little bit more error prone and harder to kind of track down. It's not necessarily in the kind of spot you'd expect it to be in. What else can we do in the email hook? So now we've got that, we can show how to put routes in here. This isn't something you'd probably normally do in an email hook, but just to demonstrate, one of the other kind of powerful features of hooks is it allows you to add extra routes to your project without going through the config routes.js file. And the way you do that is you add a routes key, and you can, inside of that, either do before or after. Before routes will be, let me make sure I'm on the right place here. Before routes are going to get bound before any user level routes, so that's before anything in your config routes.js, and after is going to be ones that are going to go after those are bound. So if you do something in after and one of your custom routes matches before that, this probably won't get run, but anything you do in before is going to get run. So if we do just a /* here and say, and this is just regular, action syntax at this point. It's just a function that accepts request and response, and we'll say and next, and we'll say, okay, another nice log, got to the before routes, and then continue on, and that lets sales continue routing after this. So if we then go in and lift, and I've done something wrong, let's take a look. Unexpected identifier, looks like I probably forgot a comma somewhere. I'm going to go in real quick and fix that. Yep, forgot myself comma. Starting up again. Okay, so sales is lifted, and what I'm going to do is go into my other window and just load up that same hello route, and we'll see what happens here. So if I go in here and do hello, now you see got to the before route and sent an email. So let's look really quickly at what's going on there. Let me share my screen again. So sales lifted, and I hit this hello function, but before it does anything in here, it's going to first match this before route that I created in the hook, and that does console.log got to the before route, and then it does next, so it keeps routing after that, hits this action, does the email send part, and then finally it responds. So that is kind of hooks in a nutshell. And one thing I was saying before, just to keep in mind, is that since this is in a folder, you can, add any file that you want and just require them like you would anything else.
It works just like any other module.
It works like any other module, but it lets you encapsulate functionality. Hooks were kind of our, first stab at sort of a plugin architecture, and they didn't really turn into plugins, but they turned into a really neat way to kind of share encapsulated logic and functionality between projects.
So Wonder has a question on IRC about hooks.
Sure.
He wants to know if they can be used to send custom socket messages.
If they could be used to send custom socket messages. Yes, you could. It depends where you put the functionality, but if you wanted to, say in this send function, if you accept a socket or even a request in here, you could then do rec.socket.emit, or actually I think message, or you can just use sales.sockets.message, which is the preferred way of doing it. So I guess you don't even actually, come to think of it, necessarily need the request unless you want to send to a specific socket. So you can look on the documentation. Let's take a look at what we have for custom socket messages. On our handysalesjs.org. And low-level socket stuff is under reference WebSockets, sales.sockets. So one thing you can do without really any other arguments needed is sales.sockets.blast. That's going to send out a socket message to any connected socket. So sales.socket.blast event name, could do just my events data is hello world. And then what we'd have to do on the front end is just subscribe to this my event message. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Oh, okay, yeah, I have to share the screen just so people can see what I'm doing. Sorry about that, folks. It's a bit of a shambles today, but we're getting the hang of it. Thank you, Loic. All right, so in my very bastardized email hook that we've created, I have the send function, and what I've written here is sales.sockets.blast. It's going to blast this event out to every connected socket. Lucky for us, the default sales site that gets created connects the socket, so it should be pretty easy to test. So what I will do to test this is we're going to lift this up and we're going to open up two windows. And I will share my console here. So sales.lift, very good. And then let's go ahead and take a look at what happens in the browser. So first thing I'll do is connect to localhost 1337, and what we can see down in the console is that the socket is connected successfully. Wonderful. So the only thing I need to do at this point is subscribe to that my event message. And what I'm doing here is just subscribing to the my events, and if such a thing should come in, it's going to log got data with the data to the console. Did I do that right? Okay. And now, since the email hook is set up to anytime the send method of the email hook is hit, it's supposed to blast out to all these sockets. So hopefully, if I then open up a new tab and go to the route that actually does that, we go back here, and lo and behold, got data, object hello world, and let's just go back and look at the code just so we can kind of go over what happened here. Let's share the right window. Oops. So what happened is I hit this route called user hello. User hello in turn hits sales.hooks.email.send, and that in turn hits sales.sockets.blast. Blast just sends it to everybody, every connected socket, and I had subscribed to that event in the console, so it gets the event. And that's all, folks. All right. What other questions we got, Cody?
So you might have answered this, but part of that was if they disable the default socket messages that are created, can you override it with the hooks? Which
default socket messages? There's no. Okay, so I'm guessing what. Let's select this here. What you mean is, okay, currently I'm not using PubSub and Blueprints. Is there a clean way to switch off auto? Okay, that's a different question.
No, we'll just leave it up there because it'll remove it. But the other question was from the IRC.
Oh, okay, so that's an IRC question. So there's not necessarily such a thing as turning off socket messages. There's turning off the PubSub methods if you don't want to subscribe to those things. You can always send out any socket messages you want, and if you want them to match the kind of syntax that the default sales PubSub ones send out, you can look at the docs for what those look like and send out things that look the same. But it's certainly easier if you want to use those messages to just do publish create and publish update. But at any point in any of your code, you can use the sales.sockets to send out any custom messages that you want. We encourage people to use the resourceful PubSub, which we discussed, I think, last week, because it's a really easy way to manage real-time messaging for your models. But you're free to use any custom events that you want. Okay, so I've got a message here in the Q&A highlighted. I think I probably should be going from the bottom up, but we'll just answer this one quickly. So what were you gonna say?
They have +1s, but I think they're all at +1.
Okay. Currently, I'm not using PubSub and Blueprints. Most of the CRUD actions, I had them over in. Is there a clean way to switch off AutoWatch for all kind of events by Blueprints automatically? I'm currently using sales.sockets methods. Well, AutoWatch is a configurable property in your Blueprints config. So if you go into, oops, let's take a look at where that is in the code. If you go into config Blueprints, AutoWatch is on by default. You just go ahead and set that to false, and that is going to. I think, Cody, I don't know if you remember. I think AutoWatch is actually only used by the Blueprints. So if you have those turned off, I don't think this is necessarily even relevant. But if you do want to turn it off and you have the Blueprint, the PubSub Blueprints on, this is where it's going to be. Let's take a quick look in here without diving too deep. Yeah, so AutoWatch is really used mainly by the core PubSub functions. You can see it in here. This is inside of Sales Core, if rec options AutoWatch. If you're not using these blueprints, then you shouldn't really have to worry about AutoWatch being on or off.
Right, unless you're somehow using that in your custom controller methods.
Right. Right. But yeah, that's the quickest way to turn it off. Is just set it to false in the configuration here. Okay, let's go to the bottom here. Okay, I am very new to sales. What if I want to connect the model to a variable that updates itself when some socket event from another app comes in? Another app. Well, you can, as long as you're connected via sockets, you can always handle socket messages from any app. I guess the quick and dirty way to do that is inside of your config.sockets, there is an onConnect, and this function is going to get run anytime a socket connects to your app, no matter where it's from. So what you could then do is socket.on some event name, so some external event, and then you can handle that event here. So you'd probably want to validate the events, the event data, and make sure that it was kind of valid stuff. But there's nothing stopping you from in here going and finding like a user model based, or updating a user model, say, based on the data in here. So if there's data user ID, setting the age to data.age, something like that. So if you wanted to hook up socket events from other apps, this would be like the easiest place to do that in. But again, if you're trying to use sockets to deal with models, I would encourage anybody to look over the resourceful PubSub stuff, and then instead of necessarily using sockets, custom socket messages, you could use sockets to just hit the blueprint routes that Sales offers to do regular updating. So you could use a socket to request /user/ or to do put/user to update a user, and kind of use the resourceful PubSub stuff that Sales gives you. And documentation for that is on salesjs.org. Under reference for WebSockets, there's a whole section on resourceful PubSub, and we also did a whole community video about that last week. Okay. Is there a clean way? Okay, so let me select this one. And Cody, you can maybe talk to this. Is there a clean way to determine if model attribute is an association? I need this info because I have global history service that shows related data if column is relation to another one. Basically, I just have object data as JSON object. And so basically the question is, can you introspect your model and determine whether a certain attribute of the model is an association or not?
So, I mean, I guess one, your model. That'd be the easiest. If you're actually trying to dynamically do this, if you go to sales.models, whatever your model name is, or it's a global, so you can just do, say you have a user model, you can do user. If you log what's in there, you're going to see a bunch of things, and one of them is going to be the schema of the model. So if you have an attribute name and your model, you can do, look at your schema. You'd have to log it. I think it's
.attributes.
Yeah, I think attributes sounds good.
Yeah, let's take a look at the console here for the. We didn't make a user model, but we can make one real quick just to see. So if we have our user model, right? So let's do a name that's a string, and a friend that's an association, just back to the user. This is right. And then let's go take a look in the console and log this user and see what happens. So if we just type, so what Cody was saying is you can do sales.models.user, or you can just do user, same thing. And I think at the top.
Oh, there's actually an associations.
Oh, well, there's that. Yeah, there's that too. Wait, let's take a look. So there's underscore attributes,
which is a private method. It might not change, but I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, if it's underscored and it looks like it's private, counting on it is at your own risk. But we do have in here, as Cody pointed out, there's definition. So maybe that's a little bit better to take a look at. So looks like there's two things you can do. You can do user.definition, and that's going to show you your this is actually probably better than attributes because it includes the ones that are auto-created for you, like created at and updated at, and you can then see that friend, it has a foreign key, is a model, it's got a foreign key, it's got an alias. So this is a way to determine that it's an association.
And this is the stuff that's added after it's run through Waterline schema, which it basically expands all these things out into types. So if you are building a custom adapter or something and you want to see what exactly is there, you can always just log the model, and this is the stuff that we add onto it.
Right. So like if you remember, we put we just said name string in our definition, and this got expanded out to name being an object of type string. And the same with the friend, we just put model user, but it expands it out to everything that Waterline needs. We also saw there was user.associations, and that is just an array that lists every association that you have in your model. So depending on your your coding style and how you want to look this stuff up, you can use either of those methods to figure out whether something in your model is an association.
Right.
All right. What else we got?
You can add the skipper one.
It's hold on. Let's do this one first.
Okay.
I mean, first come, first serve, Cody. Okay, so I have a question here. Will there be associations built into sales generate model? For example, sales generate model dog name string owner model user. I think that sounds like a wonderful pull request that somebody can do for the generator. I don't think that we'll be doing that. I mean, sales generate model, unless you're automating it somehow, or you're building some script that does a lot of this, like, it doesn't save you a whole heck of a lot of time.
It's just now you're typing it in the console instead of typing it in in your model definition.
So you're not saving a whole terrible amount of time by doing it this way. But if somebody wanted to do a pull request where you could put some JSON object in there and it would add it to the model and validate that it was correct, then you're more than welcome to do so. I'm sure we'd be happy to merge that in. Okay, is Skipper S3 adapter ready to be used in production or still under fixes and development? That is an excellent question. I don't quite know what to say about that. I mean, are we using it in production? Cody, do you know if we're using Skipper S3 in production?
I don't know.
I would say that the last I used it, it looked production ready to me. There's always going to be fixes in development, but the adapter, the S3 adapter, most of the fixes were actually to the underlying Nox MPU dependency, which is what is used to do multi-part uploads to S3, and it wasn't really there wasn't anything to do with the adapter itself, but there were some fixes in there that needed to be made, and those got merged in. Mike and I were made maintainers on that repository, so those got merged in, and since then I think it's been fairly stable, but having not used it in a little while and not knowing exactly what development has gone on in the meantime, I can't say for sure. All I can say is if you're having problems with it, definitely post some issues and we'll take a look at them. But the issues that we were having were more the underlying code base that was communicating with S3, and as far as I know, those things have been fixed.
And as far as I know, Skipper is stable.
Skipper is definitely stable and production ready. I mean, it's being used in Sales Core, so we have full confidence in that. Skipper S3, I would say is production ready. I mean, but like I said, I don't know what if there's been late development on it. That I guess the reason I'm hedging is because there is this question. If I'd just been asked offline, I probably would say yes. But if there's some reason to think that it's not production ready, we'll certainly take a look at it. Okay. Actually, it is noon time, so I guess it's probably about time to sign off. Is there anything else?
This one from Tarmo. I looked at the link. Basically, what he wants to do is he wants access control.
Okay.
So he's trying to tap into the blueprint route, the blueprint stuff. There's actually a discussion on this in the Waterline thread or the Waterline issues thread for if you just search before find. Some people are working on it. I mean, to me, you can solve all of this with a policy and a custom controller. I know a lot of people like to use the blueprints. They don't want to have to code all this logic. For us, I think on every single project, you eventually get to the point where you can't rely on blueprints anymore. You have to expand it out into a custom controller.
Yeah.
Until then, I looked through it, and I mean, what you're doing, I don't know exactly what you're trying to do, but that looks good. If you look into that, there's some people that have some other solutions for before find, which is essentially you're trying to edit the criteria before it gets to the blueprints find. You can tap in and do that in a policy like you're doing. But you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've found is that, and you can see this in the discussion, is that for every case of somebody wanting to use before find, there is a case where they want it to be exempted. So it's like, I want this, this to happen before every find, except when certain cases, and at that point, it becomes kind of useless because you're doing, the same amount of work that you'd be doing in a policy or someplace else. So, it's an active discussion that you can look on. Actually, do you have the link?
I can post it. I'll post it in IRC because I know that's the wonder in IRC. Okay. The other thing is I've heard some stuff. This isn't necessarily from these chats or anything, but people are asking if we can make the action details available in controllers, so that when you are writing a custom controller, you still have access to these action details and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. I think the reason why that question is coming up is because we've been encouraging people to override the blueprints when they're not doing what they want, but when they override them, they realize quickly two things. One, that they need those action details. You don't need them, but it's useful to have those because we're telling people to copy the core code from the core blueprints code, and they include the action details. And also, some of them are a little heavy. There's a lot of code in there, so it's maybe kind of a big ask to dump all of that in. So I think there's a possibility that could happen, that the action utils could get globalized a little bit more. So I think that's something that we'll definitely look into. And as always, if somebody has a pull request that wants to do it, then we'd be happy to take a look at that too. So Cody, do you have anything else to add for this week?
I'm all good.
Our apologies for the somewhat shambling nature of this week, but we were Cody and I were kind of running this by the seat of our pants. So next week, Mike will probably be back above board, and maybe things will run a little bit more smoothly. But anyways, thanks for everybody's patience, and have a great weekend.